Rodger, you've just shared with us some of the ways in which a youth minister might facilitate and open up new experiences for the young people by the creative use of technology. It moves me to want to ask, well, what about the meeting event itself? What about the gathering, the Vespers, the Sunday night meeting, the mission trip, the worship service? Have you had an occasion to reflect on when technology can be used to contribute to the experience of being together and when it's disruptive, and how you draw the lines?
Wow, and that really is important in these days. So for a variety of reasons, especially some of our younger young people, like 11, 12, 13, 14-year-olds, if they have a phone to themselves, I think part of what we can do is we can begin to help them discern when and where those phones are best used and when they're not used, when they do become distractions, because they can. So for instance, a standing rule in the youth group where I serve as an advisor, when we come to youth group, adults and young people alike, we put phones into a box that sits right by the door. Even the visitors do that. And I've had young people bring friends, and their friends are astonished that they give up these cell phones just so easily, but it's just part of our practice. It hasn't become a big deal. It started off as a challenge, but of late, it isn't a big deal. I think it's not a big deal because, one, we don't make a big deal out of it, but number two, if we're right that people are yearning for this connection, this real and genuine connection, then even our young people realize to an extent that when they're holding the phone and texting and not engaged in a conversation in the youth group meeting or in fellowship or in worship, that that's a problem. And so we set clear times when phones are available and when phones are not. On mission trips that are longer, for instance, one of the things that I remember most is valuing the time traveling together, whether it's on a plane or in a van or in cars. And when people have their own headphones on and they're listening to their own music, either their iPods or on the cell phone itself, or they're texting or playing games, they're not interacting. And we know that they yearn for that interaction. So there are clear times when we say, this is not a phone time, this is not a technology time. We call them no tech times. And they actually set them aside, and that's understood. I also realized during a mission trip or a retreat, well, I don't think the guys in my cabin necessarily want to hear me snore the entire night. So that could be a tech time when they can put their headphones in and fall asleep listening to some music as opposed to the music that I'm trying to make. And that's okay. That really is just fine. So I think it's not an either or, and it's not this hard and fast rule, but it's negotiated and agreed to by the whole group and supported by the whole group. The group understands also, I found young people, they discern this, they get it, that it's important for some adults to have phones available just because of emergency purposes, and they understand that. But for instance, if there are 5 or 6 of us who are adult advisors, youth leaders, youth pastors, not all of us need to have those phones available if we're just going to be there at the conference center during the course of the retreat. So only 2 of us have those cell phones available. And we published to parents and other caregivers that if they have an emergency, these are the 2 numbers that they call. And everyone seems to understand that and know that. At the same time, during some of the breaks, we give the phones back out so that young people themselves, we've discovered, can begin to share some tweets or some messages about what a great time they're having, even share photos about the last activity, etc., that they thought was hilarious. And they sort of relive those in positive ways. What we discovered is that actually communicates to some young people who aren't able to be there, and they feel somewhat vicariously, but still apparently authentically, that they're a part of that event. I've heard young people actually say, well, wasn't that cool when we, and then it occurred to me afterwards, but she wasn't even there. But I realized, oh, because of social media and technology, she felt like she was present. She experienced it almost in real time. So it's not a hard and fast rule either or, but we do agree upon some rules together. And the ultimate goal is establishing the ability to connect with each other as persons together, trying to build up the body of Christ.